Could you please introduce yourself for our students?
Certainly. My name is Jamie Duff. I am a Performance Excellence Director, which I think you'll find out more about what that means, at Wood PLC. I am 43 years old. I'm a former student at the University of Aberdeen, where I studied mechanical engineering with management.
Thank you very much. And what made you choose University of Aberdeen?
Basically, it was quite close. I guess as every student, or most students will be aware, you have to balance your studies with money, and the University of Aberdeen was one of 3 I applied to, all within Scotland, and it was the one which offered me a good, well-recognised accredited engineering course, whilst allowing me to continue to live at home.
Thank you. And what are some of the most memorable memories from Aberdeen?
I think it was a bit of a culture shock for me, actually, in a good way. So through school was quite a different experience. I remember things being very structured, quite subservient, and you really get led by the nose by the teachers and the staff. And I was a first generation student. Nobody in my whole family had ever been to university before. So there wasn't really any insight I could lean on as to what it was like. So turning up and just being expected to know what to do and look after yourself, it was very, very new. Although funnily enough, most of what I remember was spending time in the bobbin.
Nice.
So,
yeah. And why did you decide to study mechanical engineering?
That again probably was an artifact of being a first generation student. My family, nearly all the men in my family, going back 3-4 generations, had been in hands-on engineering, aerospace engineering, working on engines and things like that. And I think in retrospect, I did it because at the time, the political, the societal drive was that everybody should have a degree or you won't get a job, which I don't think turned out to be true. And I didn't really understand what professional engineering was when I signed up to that degree. So that was an education in itself, learning what a professional engineer did.
Thank you. And what were your initial career aspirations?
Initially, the family plan for me, which I think I bought into, was to join the Royal Air Force as a pilot.
That's interesting.
Studying engineering was, I guess, thematically linked to that, or it seemed to be in my head, but I don't think it was in practice.
Yes.
But yeah, that was what I intended to do with my life.
Thank you. And what clubs and societies were you part of at university?
I didn't join any societies or clubs. I did join the University Air Squadron in my first year. It turned out, though, that engineering, unlike some other subjects, was very, very full on in terms of the density of your calendar. It's been a long time, but I think it was about 35 hours a week of scheduled lectures and tutorials. And it pretty much spanned from Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. And the closest University Air Squadron was actually in St Andrews. So I ended up getting kicked out of the University Air Squadron because I could never get down there to fly.
That's interesting.
So, yeah.
Did you participate in any internships or part-time jobs?
No, I didn't. But I think the reason for that was that the career plan was to join the RAF. They didn't seem relevant at the time.
And in your opinion, how is it important to get an internship, to get a job in the future for students?
I think with the benefit of hindsight, I would say it was really quite important, actually. I think any students who are watching, who have looked at the jobs market, anybody who has recently joined a graduate program in any large company will be aware that the graduate programs tend to be, they can be quite good, but the selection criteria, I think large organisations do their best, but there's no getting away from the fact that it's very, very competitive, and the selection centres for graduates or even apprenticeship, sort of trade and craft, early careers people are a bit abstract. So I've seen a lot of internships over my time in the industry, and it's a good way to circumvent is the wrong word, but it's a good way to get a big advantage on the overall interview process because you've already got a relationship with an organisation.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to stand out from a crowd of hundreds all applying for the same 20 graduate positions.
Thank you. And do you have any advice for students who are looking for an internship in your industry?
In my industry, I think there are more internships available, I would suggest, than it might seem. So my industry, wood, is fairly well known around the world for being a large engineering, procurement, construction contractor. And I get the sense that most people perceive that this is where you come if you want to be an engineering graduate, but actually most large companies like this have got internships available for all functions. You need taxation, finance, accounting, human resources. There's the whole gambit of functions that you need to make a large company work. So I would say just look for people on LinkedIn perhaps that appear to do a role related to what you think your career might be. Although even that might be a question worth exploring in itself at some point. And just ask. I think, it's very, very rare that I think somebody in our industry is positively rude or will bite anyone's head off for asking for, how to get an internship. It's not to say that we can always help and make things happen, but the worst somebody can do is say, sorry, I can't help.
Thank you very much for this advice. And looking back at your academic journey, is there anything you would change or would have done differently?
Yes. So I think it would be fair to say that I was a reasonably gifted child, and I found primary and secondary school very easy. That meant that when I did my open day with the University of Aberdeen School of Engineering, the department head suggested that I studied more mathematics. I ignored that because I thought that my maths would be strong enough. That turned out not really to be true, and I struggled a bit in third and fourth year. So I think if I had my time again, I would probably try and make friends with different people, more nerdy ones, the ones that sat at the front of the lecture hall, and I would have put much more effort into learning how to study. I thought incorrectly that just writing down everything on the lectures was enough. It's not. So I guess if you're in first year and second year and you're freewheeling along thinking this isn't too hard and you're in a STEM degree, I'd probably step up a gear now before you start to fall behind like I did. Don't make my mistakes.
Thank you. And what is wood and how did you come to work here?
That's a funny story. Yeah, so wood is a global engineering design contractor. We construct things as well. The company goes back many decades, but we're probably most famous in the northeast of Scotland for our involvement in the oil and gas industry, although obviously we've been diversifying for quite some time, moving into renewables and materials and mining. We even did some nuclear for a while. We design things, we produce drawings, we purchase the materials often that are required to construct something, and we've got thousands of people who work for wood who work trade and craft roles on the tools building things. So I think we're about 35,000 people strong. I forget how many countries, but we have people in every continent.
That's very impressive.
And how did I come to work here? I'll be honest, I never really intended to work for wood. I worked for 14 years with a competitor, and wood had a bad reputation amongst the competitors. But I think in hindsight, probably all companies kind of do this to each other. But there was a colleague I'd worked with for a very long time, actually, at the previous company, showed up in a leadership position here. And I think about 5 years ago, he got in touch asking if I would like to come work here. And I initially said, yeah, not really. And then he had me, it was like a little date in the coffee shop at His Majesty's Theatre in Aberdeen. He was drawing an organisation chart on a napkin saying, I'd like to do some restructure, I'd like you to fit in here. And I ended up here. So it was unplanned.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. And what are some differences in the work culture at Wood compared to some of the other companies that you previously worked at?
I think, yeah, lots of companies have got different culture. I've actually seen two very different cultures even within the 5 years I've been at Wood. And I think the culture really is a reflection of the style of the top leadership. I think if the top leadership are quite shut off, if they're quite guarded, that tends to result in quite a cagey culture everywhere, which is not the case at the moment. I don't think I've ever seen one chief executive officer or members of the executive leadership in such a short period of time as we do here. So, you know, I think each of us has a call almost every, I'm not even sure how often it happens, is it once every month, every 2 months, something like that, where there's a call goes in for everyone at sort of managerial level up, and we get airtime with the full executive leadership team, and we can ask them anything, and trust me, we do. We ask some quite awkward questions. They sometimes give political answers, but there's never anything bad at all happens from asking something difficult. So it's quite good, quite good.
Great, thank you. And what are some major changes within Wood that happened since you joined, and what changes have you been involved in?
I guess we could probably answer that in two different ways. So I think one has been, there's been some quite substantial organisational changes to restructure the company and reflect what it is that we're trying to do. That in itself has been a result of the type of work that parts of the company I've been involved in has been getting. The northeast of Scotland, as I said, there's quite a strong heritage with the legacy oil and gas industry, but since the 2014 oil price crash, the market's been very, very flat until about 5 years ago, when complex projects in particular started to make a comeback. But the challenge with complex projects is that they're very, very difficult beasts to set up, to manage and deliver, compared to low-cost maintenance and minor modifications. And the company was fundamentally set up for the latter. And it meant that doing some of the bigger projects needed some, you know, additional support until we could put in place the infrastructure to get that right. But I think probably the biggest change has been that for one reason or another, I think one of the reasons has allowed Wood to survive the last oil price crash, but the technical functions were all dissolved around 10 years ago, only leaving, you know, finance, quality, things like that. But if you were an engineer, if you were in construction, if you were in supply chain, the sharp end things that Wood does, they didn't really have a functional home. So one of the biggest things that I've personally been involved in has been reintroducing that across the whole operations business unit, which is where my role fits in now, actually. So it's been quite a it's been a positive, but also a little bit of a scary journey to be part of, because I don't really consider myself an adult. And you know, when people are sort of looking around saying, "What do you think we should do?" You're always kind of looking for a grown-up, but you look around you and you're it, even if you don't feel it inside. So just trying to use what you think you've picked up over, it's been 2 decades, no, 1.5 decades I've been in this industry, I think. Or is it 2? It's 2. That's scary. It's 2. Okay.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role and responsibilities?
Okay, so I've moved into a new role about, I forget, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, something like that. So until very recently, I had some one-off positions reporting to me, like product managers for certain software applications, things like that, or information management people, but also our project controls functions and our supply chain functions within the operations business unit for the Europe, Middle East and Africa part of that. And that was probably the way that we're set up. It can make it difficult to get an exact head count because the direct reporting lines go through line management rather than function, but it was probably around 500 people, something of that order. The supply chain and the project controls persons in the latest restructure have gone to another person, which has reduced my number of direct reports to about 9, but it has meant that my role is now global, so I get to do exactly the same thing, but now you get up in the morning and you talk to Asia Pacific before the Australians go to bed, and you talk to the Americas before you go to bed. And really, we've been trying to. One of the interesting facets about Wood, I suppose, is that we are 35,000 people strong, but it's mostly been through acquisition rather than organically growing. And when you acquire companies, you get all their employees, you get their culture, and you get all their systems. So if you look through the IT catalogue of different systems that we have, it's a vast number of software applications that kind of do the same thing, but not exactly, and there's like a sort of half overlap that this one does something that one doesn't do, but they do 2/3 the same, and it's, I'll be honest, it's a bit of a mess. So we've been trying to come up with the delivery ecosystem that the whole company is going to use, which actually one of my colleagues will be delivering for us at 9 o'clock Brunei time tomorrow morning. It will be the first rollout to a client base, showing what the new standard offering is going to be. So that's been a real chew to get together. But people get emotionally invested in things, and you've kind of got to tell them that nobody's doing a bad job, but we've got to find a common way to do it, break down the silos.
That's very interesting, thank you. And what are some of the unseen responsibilities and challenges of a director?
I think when you're in a role like this, you've got a technical remit, you've got a delivery remit. There's something that somebody wants you to do. I guess what nobody tells you until you've done it for a while is that most of what you do, where most of your energy goes into managing people's feelings, actually, because you're not really doing so much yourself. There are lots of different things that need to come together. It's a complicated company. The product that we sell is complicated. If you only make technical drawings, that's one thing, but when you've got to understand a design brief, design something, all the different disciplines, they all conflict. You've got to buy the things that you need. You've got to know when you need to buy it. You've got to make sure that it's going to turn up when you need it, and then it's got to be, deal with all the logistics to track where things are, to send them offshore, or to maybe get them through customs in another country. And you need specialists. There are lots of specialists, but the specialists don't really want to worry themselves about what the other specialists need. So I think the most interesting thing about a director type position is that you are managing personalities most of the time.
That's great, thank you. And how do you keep healthy work-life balance? Do you have any tips for students in regards to time management?
I think time management has to be a relationship between you and your boss. But if you get to a position where you have people reporting for you, you need a relationship between yourself and them also. But really, I think it needs to come down to trust in some respect, that on the one side, if your boss is in a bit of a fix, and it's not the way that they normally operate, if they say to you that I need help, and they know that you'll be there for them, it's Saturday night, I don't really want to be doing this, but we'll all help each other out, you can do that. And not really count the cost. It's like a friendship. If you've got a friend that's always counting how much you've spent on beer and comparing it to them, that's all. There's a limit to how far that'll go. So if where I'm going with that is I think maintaining a work-life balance, I think needs a healthy give and take relationship. You know, if you need some time off to go to the dentist, but you don't want a boss that's going to tell you to take it as annual leave, you know, that comes from the boss knowing that you'll help them. But as part of that, you can set boundaries as well. You can set an expectation that you will. Is it realistic when you get to director you're going to work 37.5 hours a week and then switch the computer off and walk away? Not really. It's just a reality. There's things that need to get done, and you'll work a bit more than that. You have to keep a lid on it though. But like I say, I think having boundaries is fine, providing people understand you as an individual and that you're doing it not to be obtuse, but because I'm taking some time off now because I did a bunch of extra work last week and it's all going to average out. But I think if nobody takes the mickey out of each other, it usually works fine.
Yeah, thank you. And what are some challenges of trying to work with teams and clients abroad?
There are time zones is an easy one. So time zones really structure your day. It's all well and good talking about getting people back into the office to collaborate, which is fine on we have that upstairs. But it's all people working in the same time zone. When there's different time zones, it really, really restricts when you can get anything done. And an entire week can go in a flash with five one-hour sessions between Australia and the UK, for example, can wipe it out. They're there till 5, 6 at night. You're up early in the morning. Depends even which side of Australia. And then you get to legal differences and cultural differences. Even working with Norwegians, for example, you know, culturally they are not too dissimilar to us, but they've got quite a strong holiday ethic. And you know, Norwegians tend to all take July off, and then they do it again at Christmas. And it blows some people in the UK's mind that just nothing's going to happen in July or December. But you know, I think it's important to get to know people from the culture that you're dealing with. But you know, the legal aspect requires some effort. The legal aspect is not really cultural; it's quite absolute. So. You know, but a large company like Wood, there are people who know these things. And it's just making sure that you recognise that there are things that you don't know and find out who can help you inform yourself. And sometimes take a lead from the people actually living and breathing those cultures and legal systems before you try and inflict anything that doesn't fit upon them.
Thank you, and that's very interesting. And what qualities and skills do you tend to value most in your employees and coworkers?
There are many, and I am not a qualified psychologist, so I'm not going to try and speak about that. But there are many different qualities which are more commonly found or not found in certain roles. So everyone wants to be, not everyone, but lots of people think they want to be the boss. Bosses tend not to have much time for detail. It doesn't mean they have much inclination for detail, but you know, you get paralyzed by indecision if you need everything on a graph to prove with numbers that it's the right answer. By contrast, the engineers live and die by detail. You know, they could find themselves in court if they didn't pay attention to detail. So given that people will have different preferences and biases. Some people like to be detail orientated, some people like to understand the relationships of people, other people just like to deal with lots of things at a very superficial level. They just want issues to come in. Here's what's happened, here's the recommendation, we'll go with that one, thanks, next, and move on. And everyone tends to find their place, I suppose. But I think one of the things that seems to be most lacking, or by that I mean out of 35,000 people, the number of people that you can rely upon to do a particular thing is tiny, and that's to be able to communicate with lots of different people. So some people can communicate well with, here's a spreadsheet, go read that and inform yourself. Some people can make one graphic and it works for certain people, but finding people who can communicate to a diverse audience well is really quite rare. And I think I remember in university there was a couple of exercises to do presentations, and they felt a bit contrived, I suppose. I don't think anyone really took them all that seriously on my course at least, but presentation skills is something really, really rare. When you're trying to convince a bunch of people, whether it's a client, whether it's colleagues in different functions who have their own needs and wants, regardless, I think if you can concisely but convincingly articulate your point in a way that's engaging, that's a really rare skill to develop.
That's very interesting. Thank you. How do you keep up with changing trends in your field, and how do you go about adapting to such changes, such as the rise of AI, global warming, or changes in the political field?
So yeah, three very, very different topics. So AI, I think AI is not going away. It's here to stay. I think there's possibly a bit of confused optimism around what AI is, what it can do. And right now people are trying to use large language models, which is all AI really is, to solve world hunger for them, and it's not really working very well. It can generate some truly appalling answers because it does exactly what you ask it to, no more and no less. And I think what large organizations like Wood are finding is that you are precisely nowhere with AI unless your data is clean, it's contextually understood, and it's consistent. And you know where to put your fingers on at all times. And it's probably where it comes back into my role that for various reasons lots of our data is quite disconnected, and if I can't get my head around what numbers mean, there's no point expecting AI to do it. So I think AI will play a bigger and bigger role in the future, but precisely what role that's going to be, I think there's lots of ideas, it's not clear yet. Geopolitically, that's a different thing, and I guess it's a numbers game. People talk about diversification, and I think really it's a case of trying to not have all your eggs in one basket. I think there's definitely a strong drive for many reasons, even financial, interest rates for borrowing money, in having a diversified portfolio with renewable energies, sustainable solutions, that type of thing. But there's no getting away from the fact that quite a substantial part of Wood's business remains oil and gas, and that can change in a heartbeat. There's nothing really you can do about it. You just need to not get carried away. So I think as the market appears to be increasing, and it can be tempting to stop putting effort into things like workforce planning, like looking at your future sales pipeline, the probability of securing things, and how big you think the business will be this time next month, in 6 months, next year, 3 years time, and making sure that you have options. And nobody wants to think about humans, like if we give you two gentlemen a job here, I don't want to be coming back to you in 3 weeks time saying, sorry, bad news, there's no job, you have to go. Like, nobody wants to do that. And I think everyone, it's possibly quite cynical, you can say that it's just a big company, you're nothing to them, and is that true? And I guess ultimately it could feel that way, but ultimately a human, somebody like myself, has to do it, and you don't want to do it. So even when the market's on the up, you've got to be very, very careful and ensure that you know what you're going to do if something changes, and try and manage the business responsibly, manage the hires responsibly, and make sure that you hire people who have roles that you can repurpose into something else.
Thank you very much, that's very interesting. And what does it take to succeed in your career field, and would you recommend it to others?
My career's been one big meandering accident, to be honest with you. Nothing that I've ever planned career-wise has ever worked out. Now, I'm not endorsing that. I'm not suggesting to anyone at university now that you should just give up on planning. The second role I did in this industry was as a planner, which is not something that you can study, in fact, but I think it was attributed to Field Marshal Montgomery during World War II that, in something along the lines of paraphrase in times of war, that, plans are useless, but planning is essential. Or it might have been him that said, no plan stands first contact with the enemy. I can't remember. One of them might be Patton, doesn't matter. But you've got to constantly be looking at your scenarios and seeing what you can do. And I guess what that allows you to do in a role like mine, it allows you to be quite opportunistic. And do I thrive in chaos? I don't think I do. It can be stressful sometimes, but I think I've done best in retrospect in some state of chaos, which I don't know if that tells me anything that I want to acknowledge about myself, to be honest, but I'm quite a generalist. But becoming a generalist, I would suggest, is not a good way to go as a student. I think I've become a generalist from being a specialist who realised he had little interest in the specialism. But you've got to get yourself professionally sorted first. So I think my advice to anyone as a student now, you might be graduating, getting your first role, would be to keep your eyes on the here and now. I would say get good at what it is that you're being employed to do. Get yourself professionally sorted. But then I would say to show as much curiosity as you possibly can with everyone else's roles around you and try and understand what they do and where you fit in. And I think that could be a differentiator between just being good at what you do and being able to act in my role, which is kind of like a glue between different functions that don't understand each other. But I think if you try and generalise too quick, you won't really have an understanding. You'll have no foundation to move from, and you might look a bit scatterbrained or lacking in substance, which might be a cruel thing to say, but I would definitely say get yourself sorted first. Just be curious, pay attention to what everyone else does, and learn as much as you can.
Thank you very much. And last two questions. A lot of students struggle with transition from academia to professional world. What advice do you have for students to navigate this issue?
I think it would depend on the student. So, in our industry, probably other industries, it was an eye-opener for myself coming into it, to be honest. There's a sort of long running joke that you say is like, if anything's difficult, you'll say, quick, hire a graduate while they still know everything. I think whatever it is that you're studying at university, it's teaching you how to think critically. It's teaching you how to provide proof for whatever you're saying, to be, cite your sources. For the STEM type students, it's about understanding how things work at a first principles level. And all of it is extremely important, genuinely, really important. When you move into the working world, you will very quickly change from being the oldest, most senior students at the university to being the youngest people in a very big pond of big fish. And they will, the way that they will do their job will be different to wherever you think you're going to do at university, even where there are people straddling both camps, because there's a lot of people who give lectures at university who have work in the real world as well. But I guess an accredited course at university, it's a foundation, it's not a profession. So what would I say? I think expect it. Nobody's going to think you're daft if you turn up on day one and say, show me. Right? Don't expect to know what to do or what's best. Use the more seasoned people around you that have been doing this for some time. And they'll be busy, they'll be stressed, and I think, for the first few months of your career as a graduate, you might be more of a drain on them than a help in reality, but that's their job, and they accepted that when they signed up as well, and your time will come. So, don't be don't be afraid to, constantly be on it. The person that you're reporting into, it's part of their job to settle you into whatever your role's going to be in the working world. And like I say, eventually you'll be giving back as well rather than taking. It's the big circle of life in the professional world.
Okay. And the last question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I do wish that I had done more mathematics, but I think it's more a sense of pride because the degree that I left the university with was not stellar, I'll be honest. It was quite poor, in fact. It hasn't ultimately held me back, but I think that's been through more luck than judgment. I probably would like to say, if it's okay to any student that maybe graduates with a degree that's not what you hoped for, that your life isn't necessarily over. It's just you're going to have a different way into industry compared to what you thought. You might not be competitive at the big graduate assessment centre, but there are definitely other ways in. So that said, I don't really have any regrets, because I think if the career path that I've had wasn't the one that I've got, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. I don't know if it would be worse, but it would certainly be different. But if I had my time again, I think I probably would take the advice that people tried to give me that I thought I didn't need before I started, learn how to study earlier, and put the extra effort in to catch up with engineering mathematics, in honesty. But yeah.
Thank you very much.